Well, hello. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever it is you're listening to this, wherever. Don't take your hands off the wheel, and welcome to another episode of All Good Things. Episode 17, someone tells me?
18.
Episode 18, there we are.
So I usually miss one.
Well, yeah, I think I missed two. Don't worry if you were nervous that I'd been edited out of the podcast. I'm back, and I'm sorry if that's a disappointment to you. We are looking today at a podcast which is entitled What Has Paul Ever Done For Us? And hopefully by the end of our time together over the next few minutes you'll have worked out why that's a question and why it's a subtle but brilliant piece of humour. We are looking today at Romans, and we were talking about this, and you told me about some weird Jim, you told me about some weird internet Romans things.
Yes, there was online there was this it was mainly wives and girlfriends going up to their boyfriends and husbands and recording them and asking them how often they think about the Roman Empire.
Okay.
And
so the answer is presumably something like 2 or 3 times a week or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. And all these women were incredibly perplexed as to why their husbands and their boyfriends, not Christians, just across the board, why they would so often think about the Roman Empire and think about it. I mean, how often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Yeah, well, we were talking about this now, so I'm probably not going to give an accurate answer, but it comes across that kind of crazy smorgasbord that is random thoughts fairly regularly. I'd say possibly a couple of times a day, even if it's only that kind of what have the Romans ever done for us kind of thing, or that sort of, well, you know, every time you go on Watling Street, surely you think about their own empire. Yeah. Every time you go on a straight piece of road, you might think, I wonder if the Romans built this. So many times.
Or a pillar. Yeah, you see a good kind of pillar, you think of institution. And
or just roads generally always makes you think of Rome.
And armies.
Okay. Armies, that, you know, legions, anytime you get any kind of kind of historical warfare thing. So the implication of this is that women don't think about the Roman Empire at all.
Yeah, I don't feel qualified enough to start weighing in on why it's...
why is not a question any of us feel qualified to answer in that sphere. But that so there's a whole sector of the population not thinking about their own empire.
Or it'd be an interesting question. Maybe we should ask them how often they think about like the Greek and whether there's something different going on in that. And it's like they have something similar to the Roman Empire. It's just something different.
So kind of, you know, where we're thinking about Julius Caesar and Cicero, they're thinking about Philip of Macedon. Is that what you
exactly?
Okay. Maybe that is what's going on. You could be wrong. I'm going to stick my neck out here and risk a proposition that I'm not sure that women, and obviously these, you know, generalizations are what they are thinking about the Greeks rather than the Romans. I'm not going to then speculate on what they are thinking about, but I suspect it might not be. It might not be the ancient world at all. Imagine that. Imagine not thinking about the ancient world on a fairly regular basis. I just don't know how you get through life.
You'd be lost.
You'd be lost without it, wouldn't you? Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Anyway,
why are we talking?
Let's get out of that. Let's put those spades away. Stop digging.
But that does lead us into our whole question. We are obviously talking about Romans because of the book of Romans.
That is right. Yeah.
And why?
Why? Well, we're talking about Romans because last year, if you're listening to this podcast at the right time, last year we here at St Altman's we spent September through to December. Looking at Romans 1 to 4. This year, come September, we are, or in fact, probably by the time you listen to this, we'll have just started looking at Romans 5 to 11, September through to December again, and therefore it seemed a good idea, not so much to kind of talk about Romans 5 to 11, but to do a little bit of a recap and say, okay, what was in Romans 1 to 4, because... Well, like yourself, really, not everybody was here this time last year, and therefore it's just an opportunity to say, okay, this is the background to what we're saying now, or to what we're doing now.
And so you obviously you pick and decide what we read at what point. I guess before we ask about why you picked Romans, what goes into that decision making?
Okay, so I think we've talked about this quite a while ago on the podcast, but no, that's fine. Just generally, generally at St Albans for the 10 o'clock services, then I tend to sort of split the year mentally into about 3 sections. We tend to do a gospel between January and Easter, perhaps a little bit after Easter, depending on when Easter falls, and how it sort of cuts up, as it were. Then we tend to do some Old Testament, possibly, and we fit topical series in here and there as well.
And that's a little bit of the Psalms that we've been doing. The Psalms.
Yeah, well, and 2 Kings, and then a bit of the Psalms.
Yeah.
And then in the autumn we tend to do a New Testament letter, and that's generally been our practice. And that's changed a few times now and again. I think 2 years ago, for example, we did a bit of Jonah in the so it's not like set in stone.
Because you were doing Kings when me and Jasmine came incognito.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, it's kind of good that you get the kind of the full experience, the full 360 of. I suppose. Yeah, there's not tons of churches that were probably preaching on 2 Kings that Sunday.
Being at depth.
Yeah, maybe. So that's what we do. That, and because we've talked about this, haven't we? That we believe that the most helpful way to approach the Bible is to approach it as consecutively as you can. And so, it makes sense that if you've done chapter 1, then you follow that by doing chapter 2. You've got to give yourself time to actually see what's there. So I think before we started, you were asking me, how many sermons did you do on Romans 1 to 4? And I smiled and said, no, 9, which won't surprise anybody in the congregation. But, because this is like complicated stuff. And you don't want to sort of, a little bit like we've done recently with the Psalms, as Psalm 37, we split it into 2 because there's quite a lot there.
Yes.
And actually, we believe that, you get more out of it if you've got the time to dig into it. So you want to give yourself the time. That means, you don't try and do the whole book of Romans in a term. You can, but you're doing something different. That you do a significant chunk, a chunk that's not too small and not too big. You spend the time in it, you get into what's really being said, and that way I think you get the most out of it. I think also by doing it consecutively, I think it allows people not just to follow along in the sense that, well, last week we did this and this week we're doing that, but just also that I'm not the only person who can get into the book. So this isn't kind of preach at the front saying, well, of course, here's all these passages that I'm the only person who's kind of read this week. Yes. And let me just tell you what they all say. It might be what I say is true, but I'm not sure it helps anybody else to go, oh yeah, I can see that. I can see that too. Or actually, fair enough. Oh, I don't see that. No. Fine, come and talk to me. So that sort of expository preaching, whatever you call it, that sort of consecutive. So that does mean you have to choose. It does mean you have to have some discipline on making sure you've got that variety, which is why we do that sort of third-ish thing, just so that people have got different things to talk about. And it does mean that sometimes you're like, blimey, we've only done Romans 1 to 4, 9 weeks, but I think overall that helps people.
And why Romans now?
A couple of answers. One, because when I went back over my list of things I've preached on since I arrived here 9 years ago, Romans wasn't on it. Okay. So I thought,
yes.
And to be perfectly honest, that's probably as big a reason as any, in the sense that I looked at the list of things I haven't yet preached on and went, what's probably the best one to do now? So the other option, I think, from recollections more than a year ago, the other option when I was thinking about this was the book of Hebrews, and I do want to get to that, but I thought, well, actually, probably Romans is probably more what we need right now, and that's just a slightly random judgment call, really. Okay. And to be honest, probably I thought, well, I'm probably slightly more familiar with it, so it's probably easier.
And unconsciously, you're thinking a lot more about the Roman Empire than you are about the Hebrews.
Well, exactly, yeah, of course, yeah, because it's the Romans.
Exactly.
I mean, baths, heating systems. And who doesn't love a word like hypercaust? It's just such a nice word. I remember as a child reading that, thinking, whether their heating system was efficient or not, that's just the best word for one. I'm now going to get some kind of Roman expert tell me that I'm pronouncing that wrong.
Yeah, that's wrong.
I just,
You'll be all right.
It's just a regional accent.
And so, if someone was sat here and about as much biblical knowledge they have is, I know there's an Old Testament, I know there's a New Testament, I know there's a Gospel, I know there's letters.
Yeah.
What's Romans?
Romans is a letter.
Okay.
Okay, now interesting, Romans is at the front of Paul's letters. So the New Testament, our New Testament works, you get Gospels, I think Mark, Luke and John, you get the book of Acts, you get Paul's letters, starting with Romans and then finishing with, that's a good question, isn't it? Philemon. Yeah, I know, because I was going to say to Timothy, but it's not, it's Philemon. And then you get...
I knew the answer, obviously.
Did you? It's Philemon, isn't it? Check the contents. Should check the contents page. I've confused myself now. This is live.
One eternity later.
Yeah, Philemon. Titus Philemon.
Yeah,
it goes to Hebrews.
And then it goes to the general letters, which is basically letters written by anybody that isn't Paul.
Yes.
Hebrews, James, 1 and 2 Peter, 1, 2, 3 John, Jude, and then finish with the book of Revelation.
Yes.
But the letters, interestingly, the letters we have from Paul are basically arranged in roughly order of length.
Yes. Okay.
So Romans is not the first letter he wrote.
No.
That's probably 1 Thessalonians, almost certainly 1 Thessalonians, 1, 2 Thessalonians, Galatians, the earliest letters. So Romans is sort of second half of his career of letter writing, but it's at the front because it's 16 chapters long and therefore it's the big one.
Yes.
Which is worth remembering actually, because that means our natural order of reading through the New Testament doesn't always help us with Paul.
Yes.
Because I actually think with Paul, it's probably easier to get into his thought from 1 and 2 Thessalonians or Galatians than it is to get into it from Romans, which is, frankly, and I think we all said this when we were looking at it last year, it's quite hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it is quite dense at times. By that I mean it's
you wouldn't someone exploring Christianity, unless they were very, very interested in it, you wouldn't suddenly go, oh yeah, start at Romans and get.
You wouldn't. No, I think I get. It's one of those tricky ones. I mean, it's been the letter that over the years, one of the Paul's letters that over the years has been crucial in the development of Christianity because it's theologically so dense and so thorough.
Yes.
And therefore, as you know, it was one of the letters that one of the parts of scripture that Martin Luther found enormously helpful at the sort of start of the Reformation. So it's kind of, it's at some level people say it's the sort of crowning glory of Paul's thought. Okay, I can hear that argument.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's not instantly accessible. There are other letters of Paul's which are probably easier to access.
Yes.
Which may be psychologically why I've left it till
later
8 years in to start it.
And so overall, in terms of Paul is a convert to Christianity.
Yes. So this is
after Jesus. Yeah. Jesus has died, resurrected, gone back to heaven.
Yeah. So Paul's story starts in Acts 8. We meet him for the first time. Saul.
Yes.
Now I think sometimes people think that Saul was his bad former name and Paul's his new good name. It's not that at all. It is the fact that, like a lot of people in the ancient world, he probably had more than one name.
Yes.
And one of them was a kind of a sort of home team name, and then, which in Paul's case is a sort of Hebrew name, Saul.
Yes.
And then you have a Roman name as well, particularly if you're a citizen, which is Paul. And so Saul is the name.
I didn't know that.
So Saul is the name that you start with, but then when he starts going around the Greco-Roman world, surprise, surprise, it's Paul. So that's just kind of worth remembering. He's a Roman citizen. We first meet him in Acts 8. He approves of the stoning of Stephen.
Yep.
What does that mean? It means that he's clearly significant enough, though quite a young man, for his presence to be notable. The stoning of Stephen is a mob act. It's not an official act, but it's a mob act with tacit official support.
Yes.
Okay.
They don't stop it.
We know all about those, don't
Yes.
we? Okay. But then the next time, astonishingly, the next time we meet Paul, he's on the way to Damascus. He is on the way to Damascus to seek to arrest Christians and take them back to Jerusalem for trial, presumably. He encounters the risen Lord.
Yes.
For why you persecute me, and
Yes.
and then he goes blind temporarily. Ananias heals him. He then starts preaching. He's very effective. He ends up having to escape from, I think it's Damascus, in a basket. There's all sorts of stuff that happens.
Yeah.
And then we start to pick up the story, and increasingly then as we go through Acts, the story of Acts, certainly the second half of it, is really the story of Paul's ministry.
Yes.
So from the Jerusalem Council onwards in Acts 15, That's, so if you've got
Beginning's very about Peter, and then after.
yeah, absolutely. It sort of overlaps a bit,
Yes.
and then yeah, quite. And if you've got one of those Bibles with maps in it,
Yes.
you will almost certainly have a map. Paul's mission
Journeys.
Yeah. So there's essentially 3 of them, and a trip to Rome. So Paul is one of the key early Christians. He's known as the apostle to the Gentiles. That doesn't mean he only goes to the Gentiles being non-Jews. He also goes to Jews. We know that from Acts.
Yes.
It also means that it's not saying that Peter, amongst the other apostles, doesn't go to Gentiles. He just mostly goes to Jews. That's the division, because Peter, of course, is the one who in Acts is the first one to go into a Gentile house and preach, and Cornelius converts.
Yes.
So, but that's the story from Acts. So Romans is a letter that Paul writes to Romans. Fun enough, unusually, this isn't a church he founded.
Okay.
So a lot of Paul's letters, 1 Thessalonians, Corinthians, written to churches that he founded. This is not that. Slightly different letter. That probably affects its feel. And he writes to them. He writes to them to encourage them. He writes to them to engage them in his mission. He writes to them to sort of help them theologically, and he writes them to raise some money, frankly. And those final 2 purposes come towards the end, because he's raising money for collection for Jerusalem, one of Paul's big things.
The big famine.
And there's famine, and then I think the other thing that's going on is because increasingly through the first century there's a sort of informal separation between synagogue and church, and what that means is that some Jewish widows and orphans who previously have received support from the Jewish structures through the synagogue, well, they're not getting that anymore because they joined the church. So actually, and because it's probably the case that Jerusalem has a higher proportion of widows particularly than other parts. Well, it's one of the places that people used to try and go to sort of finish their life in Jerusalem. There's various other stuff going on. And it probably has a comparatively high proportion of people who are not able to support themselves by work. Then the church in Jerusalem does need the wider support. It's really interesting kind of sociologically what's going on there, but it's just that's one of the things that Paul is definitely doing when he writes Romans. He also wants to go to Spain, and so he wants them to engage and support that mission. So this is, which probably tells you, if you know a little bit about Paul, that we're more towards the end than the beginning. So this is Paul starting to think, right, well, I've been here, I've been across this part of the world, this is clearly bigger than I thought it was going to be, because Paul takes a bit of persuading to go even out of what we would call Asia Minor, Turkey, into so Greece and that area. But now he's thinking, okay, this is ends of the earth means everywhere. Yeah, that's what it means. It means get the gospel out everywhere. So you can sort of almost see the thought process, and Romans is part of that. So he writes this letter to them.
But I guess just going back to the significance of Rome. It's like in today's letter, if we're going we're writing a letter to Duffield.
Yes.
Or I'm writing a letter to the church in Hollywood.
Yeah.
There's a significance about place.
There is, isn't there? So
and obviously Rome at that time.
Like sort of, I don't know, a whole load of world leaders feeling that they have to go visiting the White House for whatever reason. You know what I mean? Because we joke about it, but it's true, because that's where the centre of power is.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely that's definitely Rome. Self-consciously Rome. I mean, it's really interesting how, I know it's because we call them Romans and we kind of miss it, but they are Romans, not Italians, in terms of how they think of themselves. Rome is the eternal city. Yes. So in a way that we don't talk about the Athenians, the people of Athens, as in the same way we talk about the Romans. Because that's partly us, but that is partly how they thought of themselves. So Rome is Rome is, as far as they're concerned, the centre of the universe, in the same way that for another set of people, Jerusalem is. Yeah,
and because the danger is obviously we can read our Bible and we just put everyone back in history in one place, and we go that the people in Jerusalem are basically all first century people, like the people in Rome. Which is like there can be such a
huge cultural differences. Yeah, and look, absolutely more than it would. Yeah, probably as much as travelling from Jerusalem to Rome today. Different, but as big a cultural shift, I would say, in terms of it's different, but a cultural shift of moving from a place where one, or in the case of Jerusalem, sort of two. There were two main religions that are historically dominant that are not Christianity.
Yes.
In the 21st century, moving to Italy, where Christianity has been the dominant religion, but it's a big culture shock. It's not the same culture shock in the first century, but it is a big shift. That's helpful.
And then also, who's the emperor at the time? What's Rome going on at that point?
It's mid-50s, so I can't remember who the emperor is.
It's not Nero and the big persecution.
No, Nero's a little bit later. So at this point, mid-50s, and we know this in the Book of Acts, the Roman Empire is a friend to Christians as much as it's a foe.
Yeah.
Because at its best, the Roman Empire represents law and order and the restraint of evil.
Yes.
So there's a number of times in Acts where basically Paul is rescued by the Romans because they're effectively the police. They're peace, and mostly they want due process.
And I guess at this point, Christianity, the church in Rome, isn't big enough to be a genuine threat to their power.
So they may have been kicked out of Rome, but that's because they would have been kicked out with the Jews being kicked out.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's an expulsion late 40s. Again, sometimes a bit hazy with exactly the details, but that appears to have happened. And if Christians appear to have left, but they would have left because they would have been treated as a Jewish sect. So you're the same as them, off you go, kind of thing. Because for a long time, understandably in the first century, Christianity was treated as a Jewish sect. That is just a set of Jews who have particular beliefs about this guy, particular beliefs about this guy called Jesus.
Yes.
And it's only later on when Christianity becomes bigger, or where you get the kind of sporadic persecution, which is the persecution where a ruler takes the easy path. Yeah. So it's a little bit like at school sometimes back in the old days, where whoever the teacher found making the trouble is the one who gets into trouble, even if there's been 12 other people beforehand. And
you're the one who got caught doing it.
You're the one who gets caught doing it.
So you're in trouble, what did they do before?
So some of that's just like, that's not active persecution of the church, that's just kind of rulers just saying,
incidental,
knocking some heads together, and your heads happen to be the wrong one. That happens to Paul as well. So it's a huge cultural shift. This letter was written by Paul. He writes to he writes to encourage them. He writes for the other purposes that I've mentioned, and of course he writes, because this is Paul's letter. He writes scripture, and it's possible by this point that Paul is certainly aware that his letters have a wider circulation than just the immediate people he writes to. That's certainly developing, and it's quite possible that at this point it's hard to dig through this, that his apostolic consciousness is starting to realise that actually this letter is not just for this church in Rome, that actually there's going to be something that hopefully is of benefit to Christians. To write a long letter, to commit the time to it, to commit the parchment to it, to get a secretary to write it, which is what he would have done. He would have not written it. It's not written in his own hand. It'll be written by a secretary, so it's legible. And then to get someone to travel however many hundreds of miles it needed to be, to get to Rome, that's quite an undertaking. Yes. It's not like sending an email.
No. And I guess within that, you see this quite a lot within the New Testament. It being quite important that the teaching that is happening in one place is consistent.
Yes. Yeah. No.
And being inconsistent with other apostles. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Paul goes a great length to tell that I don't disagree with Peter, or I don't disagree.
Yeah, well, no, that's the 1 Corinthians stuff, isn't it? Yes. It's like, just don't worry, why are you trying to say I follow Peter, or I follow Paul, or I follow Apollos? We're all saying the same thing. And that whole thing he does a number of times in Corinthians, where he says, this is my teaching in all the churches.
Yes. So the Corinthians can't go, oh, you said that to Rome, you said it to here, it doesn't matter to me because I'm not there.
And that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's one of the things that we culturally struggle with, is that we tend to approach the New Testament as individuals, and therefore we're always kind of thinking individualistically, and we're always hearing things and saying, oh, is that something I need to listen to?
Yes.
Now a collectivist culture,
or how can I get out of this?
Whereas a collectivist culture hears everything as this is what we must do, and look, there are strengths and weaknesses of both, but it is just that sense that these instructions are not just for them, but for now.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
I think we're. I think we need to stop there because we've just about reached about 25 minutes, and that's kind of our podcasting limit. So I think we might have Romans 1-4 part 2, where we actually talk about what's in Romans 1-4.
Yes. What is so? This we've set the scene for what
Yes.
is what is
What is
Romans,
Romans? Yeah.
and understanding it, and then in the next time we
In
can,
episode 18A,
we can look at the
Yeah.
details of Romans 1-4.
Yeah, brilliant.
Brilliant. Thank you for your time.
No problem.